4 years ago, there were some startling revelations about the activities of the CIA in Canada. The American Intelligence Agency had paid for a series of brainwashing experiments under a project codenamed MKUltra.
Convinced the Soviets and Chinese had perfected brainwashing during the Korean War, the agency sought to perfect its own techniques, both to protect its agents and to use as a weapon.
I mean, first, there's a wave of, this guy has to be f***ing kidding, right? But then it's jealousy at the sheer scale of imagination required.
Allow me to introduce our American visitors. I must ask you to forgive their somewhat lackadaisical manners, but I have conditioned them, or brainwashed them, which I understand is the new American word.
Science fiction for people who don't understand they're watching science fiction. The sort of stuff that only unstable tinfoil hat loons could possibly believe.
The United States government actually did carry out on our citizens experiments involving radiation. In too many cases, informed consent was withheld. Americans were kept in the dark about the effects of what was being done to them. The deception extended beyond the test subjects themselves to encompass their families and the American people as a whole. For these experiments were kept secret, and they were shrouded not for a compelling reason of national security, but for the simple fear of embarrassment. And that was wrong. The United States of America offers a sincere apology to those of our citizens who were subjected to these experiments, to their families, and to their communities.
The CIA man overseeing the project was John Gittinger.
There was continued pressure put upon anybody within the agency in connection with trying to explain or understand brainwashing. So we were charged with rather an elaborate attempt to try to find out chemical, psychological, any kind of means that people could use to influence the behavior of the people.
One small project in which we had a hypnotist do some experiments, primarily to see what the limitations of hypnosis might be. Can you make a person do something under hypnosis that he would not ordinarily do?
But depatterning is a use of electroshock treatment in a totally different way, in which instead of giving the shocks, say 2 or 3 times a week, they're given 2 or 3 times a day for 3 or 4 weeks, reducing the patient to a sort of animal, vegetable state, from which it's hoped that they would recover in a more healthy state of mind. It didn't work.
Number of shocks and the seconds that they held the shocks. They 30, 30, 35, 35, 35, and they held it for, sustained for 40 seconds. A normal shock would be a second. Certainly not 30 and 35 of them. One, not that many, which probably is what obliterated my memory right there. And I think that's the way they did it. That's the way they did it. No seizure, shock, restarted, so they gave me a second one. Because they couldn't produce a seizure. So they must have done it over again, must have repeated it. It's unforgivable. And I'm sure I wasn't the only one they did this to.
I was in a coma for 86 days. I had to be toilet trained. I was a vegetable. I had no identity, I had no memory, I'd never existed in the world before, like a baby.
Later on, we found out that it was a collaborative work between the Canadian government and the American government, the CIA and the Canadian government, who actually condoned this experimentation on unknowing victims, actually. It seemed that to have happened in our country was something really surprising and disappointing.
Many of you have heard of the Warren Commission or the Church Committee. Probably less, however, are aware of 1975's Rockefeller Commission, named for Gerald Ford's vice president and head of the commission, Nelson Rockefeller. See, Gerald Ford convened the commission in 1975 to look at CIA activities within the United States. The commission was largely discredited, however, since White House officials revised and redacted a large portion of it, 86 pages to be exact.
Senator, the Rockefeller report didn't seem to go into any abuses that hadn't already been hinted at in the newspapers. Have you found any evidence of things that are still unknown by the general public, things that haven't been in the press?
Well, I think that if I were to answer that question, I would begin to cross the line that the committee has properly drawn. And our work must probe much deeper into the subject.
And in comparison to allegations that have been made in the press against the CIA?
Well, by now there have been so many that it's very hard to know which one you would be comparing with.
But I mean, generally speaking, does it come off better than the public has been led to believe by reading the press?
Well, I don't know how the public reacts to what they read in the press.
But who's going to investigate the CIA?
Well, the Congress is a separate branch of government. It has its own powers, its own decisions. I would assume that when the leadership gets back, that they'll sit down and try and work out a plan that will protect the public interest, that will ensure the reestablishment of confidence, and that will not destroy in any way a very important and essential element of national security.
After I have further studied the recommendations of the Commission, I will order or submit to the Congress the necessary measures to ensure that the intelligence community functions in a way designed to protect the constitutional rights of all Americans. It remains my deep personal conviction that the CIA and other units of the intelligence community are vital to the survival of this country.
In 1973, all MKUltra files under the control of the Technical Services Division Chief of the CIA were ordered destroyed by the director, Richard Helms. But in a bureaucracy as vast as the Central Intelligence Agency, it's difficult to destroy everything. And the damning evidence of the Cameron Project surfaced after a Freedom of Information Act suit.
When the CIA went into this brainwashing stuff, what they call the MKUltra program, when they went into that, they injured lots more people than the 9 we are suing for. They injured a great many other people.
Here in the United States?
Here in the United States. They may feel that they've got so many skeletons in their closet that settling with us, even though we're clearly right and they would like it to go away, would hurt them as a precedent. I can't think of any other reason that they're being so really rough on us.
I understand, though, that the American position is that this kind of CIA material can't be released for national security reasons. Maybe that's true.
Well, security, my neck. First, the CIA, everything they forget. Then when they have to stop forgetting, because it's ludicrous, then they say it's all national security. What is national security about the apologies of the United States to Canada? If I were in charge of a government to whom 9 citizens that we are suing for have been brainwashed without their knowing, have had their lives impaired, and have it done by a foreign agency, undercover without the government of Canada knowing it, I would find a way to help those people instead of hindering them.
In the 90s, the Government of Canada, which also funded Cameron's experiments, compensated several dozen patients, but only those who had been completely depatterned, reduced to incontinence, unable to tie shoelaces.
There's no way we can get their health back, but what we can get them is some funds to help ameliorate their old age with the damage that's been done to them by this lousy performance that occurred through the CIA by Dr. Cameron mistreating them and hurting them.
And that's a debate about do you believe or don't believe. I'm always interested in what are in the documents saying. So the documents clearly describe implanting electrodes in people's brains, activating the electrode from a remote transmitter, and changing the person's behavior.
And to all those who represent the families who have been involved in these incidents, let me say to you, I hope you feel that your government has kept its commitment to the American people to tell the truth and to do the right thing. This report I received today is a monumental document in more ways than one. But it is a very, very important piece of America's history, and it will shape America's future in ways that will make us a more honorable, more successful, and more ethical country.